Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. I'm your host, Davis Carman, and today our guest is Jeannie Fulbright, author of the Young Explorer series published by Apologia. I want to remind you, our listening audience, that you can watch us on YouTube. We've been doing this for a year now, and we're still on YouTube, or you can continue listening on your favorite podcast app. Okay, Jeannie, let's talk homeschool. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have another conversation. We've been doing this a while, but we're going to talk about science today, no surprise. And, all the subjects are, science, math, Bible, history, language arts. There's so many subjects out there, but science is unique in a lot of ways. So what if a family could do one thing consistently to build a strong science thinkers in their home, what would you recommend that be?
It's one of the things that they really can't do in the traditional school setting, and that is do science together as a family with the parent who is teaching, or hopefully both parents if possible, so that families can learn together and discuss what they're learning with each other, because that kind of dialogue reinforces what they're learning. It helps children to understand more. They can ask questions. The parents who most of us did not get a great science education because we went to traditional schools, and they teach science in a check the box sort of system, and it doesn't encourage long-term memory. It doesn't encourage deep discussion or really even abstract thinking. It doesn't require a child to the way they teach science in schools doesn't excite the inner thought system where a child is really contemplating what they're learning, asking questions. And here, when you're doing it with your parents, the parents are learning science usually for the very first time. And so they're getting to discuss it with their children.
No,
So I would say doing it together.
well, that's great, and that's the beauty of homeschooling too. That so many parents do talk about how much they're learning as they're doing this with their children. And
Yes.
and you talked about the several things already, but let's go a little deeper. When you think about the Charlotte Mason teaching philosophy and how the books that you've written are developed, how do the following fit together? So you got narration, observation, and notebooking. How do those pieces, as you're teaching science to your children, how do they form habits of attention, and why is that significant?
Well, I would say that really attention is it's been scientifically proven that attention can be trained. And I think a lot of us just assume, oh, maybe our child has ADHD, and I actually do have children with ADHD, legitimate ADHD. So I understand about attention and that there really is legitimate attention issues. But you can, by using certain methodologies, actually train your children to have sustained attention. And it's really hard to teach a child who is not focusing or paying attention. And so what we are as parents, what we have the privilege of doing is helping to train the part of our children's brains that can focus sustained attention on learning. And some of the ways that we do this in my curriculum is narration. Narration is simply the art of having your child tell back what they've learned. And so after a short reading segment in my science books, and I recommend doing this in whatever curriculum you're using in every subject, is you stop reading after a little bit and you just have the child. So what did you learn there? What was the most interesting thing about how can you explain in your own words how the sun gets its power from what you've learned? And how is this evidence of creation? And these kinds of questions actually cause the child to have to, instead of just getting back information, which is this is a chemical change that happens when a child is learning information, but there's no physical change that goes on. There's no neural pathways that develop when a child is just listening to you read. And so, what happens when a child has to explain the information back to you? This is powerful. This is a powerful thing that happens because the child has to order the information in their brain. They're thinking about it, they're contemplating it, and then they're trying to figure out how they are going to teach you what they've just learned. And when, the teacher always learns the most, when a child is teaching you what they've learned, then what happens is that develops actual physical neural pathways. So it's not just a chemical change of learning, it's the physical chain of retaining information, retention. And so observation, I think, is obviously something that in today's world, children are they're flitting from thing to thing to thing to thing. And so what we want to do is we want to teach them to sustain information and look and listen and notice. And for example, in my books, we have beautiful diagrams that they can look at all the layers of the skin and understand how everything works together, or they can go outdoors and they're given activities where they're told to observe certain things, and they trying to figure out where things are in the sun, in the sky, in the night sky, or out in nature. And these things train our child's attention and also train the power of observation. And this is something as we as parents can train. It's not something that it comes naturally for a little child to be observing things all the time. But when we get our children in school, sometimes we are flitting from place to place. And also, I think that with the wonder of technology, children sometimes lose the ability to focus and have sustained attention. And then the last thing, notebooking, that uses a child's creativity and their memory from what they've learned. And scientific studies show that creativity and memory are both housed in the hippocampus. And when you put together a child's creativity, where they're drawing a picture of selling the earth because they've learned all the great features of the earth, and now we're going to try to sell the earth and sell it on all the great features it has. The child's using their own creativity, their own thought patterns and processes, and then they combine those, and those also create neural pathways and sustained attention. So notebooking and worksheets just don't do that. You don't even go into a contemplative, deep thought process when you're filling out a worksheet. And so therefore, long-term retention is forfeited.
Yeah. Oh, that right there was fantastic, because part of what you told parents is by going through this kind of narration, observation, and notebooking process, you and your kids will actually be very engaged in what you're learning, and you'll enjoy the process. And you'll want to come back tomorrow and do the same thing on the new pieces of information that are in the text and in the pictures and in God's creation as you go outside. I remember when our kids were young, before they could even write, they'd go out and they'd get a flower, they'd come back in, and they would tell Rachel what they were observing. They would dictate to Rachel, and she would write in their notebook, because they couldn't even write letters yet. They're in kindergarten, first grade maybe. And they were learning because they were so engaged. They were listening to what was being read, going and collecting an object, diagramming it in their own young way, but then paying attention and then trying to teach mom and explain what they wanted her to write in their little notebook. So whether they're in first grade or sixth grade, what you just explained is worth the price of everything, just in terms of how fun and enjoyable and engaging this learning can be.
It's amazing. Actually, just a little story is I had a lot of my child's notebooks in separate little binders because we didn't have notebooking journals when I was homeschooling my children. So I had them all in separate binders, and I was going to combine them all into one binder. And I was looking at something my daughter had drawn And this was when I think she probably was around 30 at this time. And I texted her this picture and I didn't know where it would go in this large notebook I was putting it in. Because when your children do notebooking, you save their stuff and you show it to your grandchildren. It's just you save it forever. You don't save worksheets forever. And I texted her a picture and it was something she had drawn when she was about 8 years old. She remembered exactly what it was.
Mm,
She knew what it was. I couldn't tell what it was. She knew what it was because it does create long-term retention and memories. And that's why notebooking is superior to every other
mhm.
methodology
Oh, that's
of
great.
producing work. Yes,
That's great.
thanks.
So, you got all kinds of different subjects families are trying to teach their kids, but science is unique in some way. So, what do you think science teaches children about God that is unique that other subjects don't quite get to the level of teaching?
I That's a great question. I think that when we begin to understand the intricacies of science. And I'm not talking about the spiral method where you're trying to cover so many subjects in one year that you're only really going an inch deep and doing surface level science. That's just really memorization and trying to understand the basic processes. But as we do with my books, and we immerse deep into a subject in a field of science, we uncover really amazing scientific phenomena and truths and processes and how things work together, and we can see just how incredibly brilliant our Lord is. We it is it I think it increases our amazement and our awe of the Lord because we see how powerful, how intelligent he is. It would be impossible for these things to just come by chance. And the way that things work together, it really is inspiring. And if you know, and if you're pointed to the Lord, God created this process to work together, whether it's pollination or our immune system or how the planets circle the sun and the solar system, the galaxies. All of these things are just they really give us more of I would say, an awe of the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing is to fall in love with God by engaging with his creation, learning
Mm,
how our human bodies are made, learning how the planets move around and the solar system and all that works together. Learning how I love physics, and so just the combination of the physical laws that explain, how gravity fits into things where you can predict how things will move and land, and it's all so amazing, especially as you just said that it points us to the awe and wonder of the God who made it all. So science
that's
is
so
unique in
true.
that way. Oh,
That's so true. I just finished my update for, well, actually, I just revised the, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. You can
you go
delete it if
ahead.
you
Yes, you
want.
can.
I just updated the anatomy book, which I know we're publishing that soon, but I did a revision of the immune system chapter and just seeing just the intricacies of how God has specific cells that come out to battle and just how our immune system is intricately woven together. It's a miracle. It's like we live in a battlefield and we don't even know what's going on. And it's a powerful reminder of just the incredible God we serve and how he protects us. He builds our bodies in such a way that we are protected by the way he designed us. The Lord is amazing. And I think learning about his creation gives us just such a gratitude and such a just excitement about the Lord we serve.
Yeah, I loved how you said it a while ago, the awe and wonder of the God
Hmm.
who created everything. So what
Yes.
about God's character? Is there anything that science teaches us about his character that might be surprising to adults or children?
Well, I think science teaches us a lot about God's character in the way he designed things, but I think what's really interesting is that God, the world that he gave us is so beautiful. If you look at just a sunset or a tree, or even as you mentioned, a flower, how beautifully designed and how creative God is. He did that to delight us. It delights him, but he wanted to delight us. God wants obedience from us. He wants us to live for through him, but really he wants us to experience delight. He wants to delight us in this creation, the the animals that we so delight in. He wants us to be delighted. God, it just is such a loving, good God that he wants to give us joy. And I think that that is one of the incredible things that we can see in science is there's so much joy in learning about all the different amazing things and the amazing ways that God created the world and joy in seeing his creation.
Yeah. So with science, it's creation based, obviously. We're assuming that God created everything, but it's still science curriculum. But as the following things that we just discussed happen, we fall in love with God. We are just inspired by the awe and wonder of what he did and how beautiful everything's created, and we delight in that creation. That's wonderful, but does that begin to take away from the rigor of the science, or how do they complement uh, each other? Uh, because we're trying to teach a subject, and it's great that we're falling in love with God and seeing the beauty of him and his character, but how would you address the academic rigor piece?
Well, I would say that if we can, especially with elementary through middle school, when we're not specifically trying to build a transcript for college, if we can help our children fall in love with a subject, what that does is that there is rigor. If you go deep, I believe awe and wonder and experiencing the joy of creation and the excitement of science is wonderful. But if you can go deep in a scientific topic and subject, your child truly understands it and learns it. And you don't need a checklist. You don't need a worksheet and that checkbox and okay, take this test and now you've proven that you read the material and checked it
Right.
off and you've shown me that you've read it and now I have all this evidence that I did school. What you're doing is you're building a love for learning, and that love for learning will take your child through high school, through the rigorous building that transcript subjects, give them at opportunities to really discover who they are. Charlotte Mason calls this the divine curiosity. She
Yeah.
says she says the divine curiosity, which is really the Holy Spirit's leading of our spirit in our interests and passions and gifts and talents. She says the divine curiosity which should have been an equipment for life, meaning this is what is going to equip us for the purposes that God has for us. Should have been an equipment for life, rarely survives early school days. Early school days. They have shown that children come into this world with a natural motivation. There's a book called the this it's by William Strickford. It's the self-motivated child. I think it's what it's called. But he did all these studies, these research studies, and he found that children are come into this world naturally motivated, self-motivated to learn, to do. And then they found that this is just a natural, it goes up, 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 and then at the age of 7 it drops straight down. What happened at the age of 7? They've they've been in school for 2 years.
Yeah.
They are done. What we've done by creating the modern education system, which was really never designed to truly give children an education. It was designed to train obedience and
Right.
following instructions. And there was a reason that it was created, and that's a whole nother subject, which was a legitimate reason to create it because it was countries wanting to create soldiers and have factory workers. But What happened is that this kind of rigor, which is really a false education system, causes children to lose their natural curiosity and their natural love for learning. And so, what we want to do as homeschool parents is we want to nurture their curiosity, nurture that divine curiosity. And what happens is our children begin to develop special interests and explore, and then they begin to make connections, and all of this works together to take them into the future and the vocation or even the hobbies that God has for them as adults. And so they're going to live a lot longer as
Mhm.
adults, and we want them to love learning. We want them to go into their adult life with still that
Right.
natural passion for learning still alive. And if we make science and every other subject this checkbox and
Yeah.
something that we have to just move our children through and prove that we've done it and feel like we've accomplished something when really we've basically just extinguished that passion and excitement for learning, then we handicap them for
Right.
a future of just excitement about the world and excitement about what the future holds for them.
No, that's so true. And I'm thinking about, you know, we're talking about falling in love with God by being engaged in the curriculum, the narration, the observation, the notebooking, but then falling in love with learning itself. But if science is taught well, there are other thinking skills that can spill over into other subjects. What would you say to that?
Well, I think if science is taught well, a child will feel confident. That gives them confidence when they really understand a subject well. So that does require to go deep into a scientific topic. A lot of people come out of the traditional setting and they're worried because they get a book like, oh, what your fifth grader needs to know, and it's all this stuff. And they think, oh, I can't just go deep into astronomy. I have to teach all these fields. But in reality, if you go deep into one subject, your child comes out with confidence and knowledge where they can actually have an intelligent discussion with an adult in that field and enjoy that. The adult will enjoy the conversation, as will they. And what happens is this builds a child's confidence in their ability to learn and understand and really comprehend complicated information and complicated truths. And this actually gives them confidence in all of other
Right.
subjects. A child who has confidence in their ability to learn will take that confidence into other subject matter, subject areas. It builds just such a powerful love, a love for learning and confidence in their ability to learn, I believe.
Yeah, the confidence is key in learning. And one of the ways we can beat that down is when they're struggling and we can't change the subject, we can't change the curriculum, we can't change the method. But with homeschooling, you got the flexibility to turn on a dime, to make some adjustments, immediately and quickly. And you don't have to go to a board of directors or to a principal or teacher. You are in charge. And so
Yes,
there's so much uh, advantage that brings to the family in a homeschool setting.
I agree.
So we live in a day and age with social media out there, and a lot of families, might share what they're doing in their homeschool online for people to see and, get a little, dopamine hits from that. But what would you say to families that feel they're doing science all wrong because their their pictures aren't Pinterest worthy or they're not they're not working out as good as it looks like everybody else is doing. What would you say to address that?
Well, I will say that I'm really glad that I was done homeschooling before this social media, Instagram, and all of that came about. It is very tempting to want to set up a photo to show how good your family looks doing this subject, and it is very tempting. And I think it's fun to see that stuff online, but you're only seeing one moment in a full day of a family of normal human beings who cry, who have temper tantrums, who don't want to learn this subject, who don't want to do school. You're looking at a tiny little window of one moment in somebody's life, and we've got to stop comparing ourselves to the Pinterest, the Instagram, the Facebook, because that's not real life. And it is fun to portray like that moment where, it looks beautiful and it looks idealistic. But the truth is real life homeschooling is messy, and doing
Yeah.
science is it's not going to look perfect every day. Some days you're going to get through 2 pages. Some days you're going to get through one paragraph and somebody's got a problem and then you're going to have to go back the next day. It is just it's the journey, it's the long-term focus. I remember somebody asking me, I want to start homeschooling, but can I come and just come to your house and observe you homeschool for an entire day? And of course, I'm thinking, no way. There is no way anybody's coming into my house to watch us for an entire day. We are a hot mess. And yet all my children went to college on scholarship and they all graduated from the University of Georgia. It's the long-term focus we need to have, not these moment by moments. And there was never a day, not one day, where we had a perfect idealistic homeschool day. So I would say with science and every other subject, it's okay. It's never going to look beautiful. It's never going to look Pinterest worthy. It is about it is about looking to the purposes that God has for your children, helping them to move steadily, steadily, slow and steady wins the race towards the future that God has for them.
Oh yeah, you just brought back a flood of memories from our own family homeschool experience. Because, like you say, I don't think we ever had that perfect day, but you know, in some of my presentations, I'll have a picture that looks like we have it all together, but it was for that 5 seconds that the picture was taken, and then chaos broke out right afterwards. So yeah,
Exactly. And your children are all beautiful, successful, amazing people and parents. So it's the future. It's what we're looking towards, it's the legacy we're creating.
uh,
And it's messy.
that's right. That's right. Well, let's get back to some of the teaching methods. So we talked about narration, observation, notebooking, and being engaged with your students, reading to them. But what role does asking questions play in the teaching of science or really anything? It seems like questions would be an important part of the engagement and the interaction with your students.
Oh, absolutely. And that I would say that kind of falls into the narration aspect where I really encourage parents. I I remember I learned about the Charlotte Mason methodology when I was brand new homeschooler, and I went to a 4 day immersive seminar. I had no idea who Charlotte Mason was. I just went with a friend to support her because she wanted to go, and also because I got a babysitter and it was, it was a break. So it was really fun. But I learned all of this incredible Charlotte Mason methodology. And one of the things that she taught was narration and how you ask these questions. So what was the most interesting thing you learned? Tell me about what was something that happened in this narrative, or tell me what you learned about certain things. And these questions actually stimulate your child to really think more about what they're learning. And I think that at the end of every one of my lessons, I have a what do you remember? A series of questions that will jog the child's memory for the whole. It's usually 2 weeks to go through one of our lessons, but it jogs the child's memory for the whole 2 weeks, and you're just asking questions, it's not yes or no questions. It is, let's think about what are some of the ways that animals camouflage themselves. And so they're thinking about the different camouflages that they've learned about in the lesson. And it's a great way to help your child think deeper about what they've learned. Not the yes or no, this was in the lesson, so now I'm asking you, you have to answer exactly what was in the lesson, but it's more of a drawing out. The word education actually comes from, I believe it's Latin or Greek, which means to draw forth. And so
Mm.
education is not pouring in, it's drawing forth, drawing out of the child because God has given them a brilliant mind and a spirit and a soul. And from that spirit, soul, and body, they are able to put together all of the information that you've been teaching them, that they've noticed out in nature, and you're able to ask them questions to draw forth from them what they understand about what they've learned.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I mean, the dinner table is a great time to just have the conversations, ask some questions. You can start as simple as, "What did you learn today?" And then there'll be a series of pretty obvious and easy questions from there. And pretty soon you'll be going deep into the subject they learned that day. The
Exactly.
driving around in the car was a time that we would often ask the kids questions about what we were just learning. And I remember this one time with one of our young kids, they mentioned some fact about flying fish. I don't even remember what the fact was, but Rachel and I looked at him, and he's probably 8 or 9 years old at the time, and we thought, no, that can't be true. And he said, oh yes, it's on page 123 of this book. I was like, okay, and we all got home, got that book, opened it up to page 123, and sure enough, he was right. And just how how much enjoyment the kids had learning the different subjects and having these conversations surrounded by questions, before, during, and after.
Yes, yes, I love that, and I love hearing from parents that say, my husband came home from work and the kids were so excited to tell him everything they learned about science today, and then the dad is asking questions about what they've learned, and it is just it's that it goes back to your first question about the one thing you can do, and that is the dialogue, learning science together as a family, all your children learning the same subject that are between kindergarten and middle school, and learning together with mom and dad, everybody talking about it, asking questions, and really causing this science to go deep
Right.
into their just who they are. That's what the part of who we are is the things we really know, and that's what my books I pray and have seen over the last many years have done is given children a good foundation
Right.
in who they are and what they know, and a love for science and a love for learning.
That's true. So I'm thinking right now that our listeners are very encouraged by what we're talking about today. Sounds great. I want this for my family. But what would you say to the family that might be a little discouraged right now? What kind of encouragement can you give them to do this well, to not give up, to approach science with some confidence of their own, and a joy and engagement and enthusiasm if they're struggling right now and they're not feeling it as much of the energy as we're having in this conversation?
Well, I would say that first of all, of course, you are the mom or the dad, whoever's homeschooling. You are the parent that God chose for your child. You are the person God chose for your child to be taught by, educated by. This modern education system where we send kids off was not part of the original design. The original design was for parents to teach their children. And you were created to teach your children. They are created to be taught by you. And God will provide you everything you need to do it perfectly according to his design, not perfectly according to the world's design, but perfectly according to his design. And guess what? It's not going to look, like I said, it's going to be messy sometimes. It's not easy. Homeschooling is not easy. When I look back on the homeschooling, it seems like, oh, it was so fun and I miss it so much. And I've got all adult children and they're all great and have great careers and doing great. But I do miss those early years. And guess what? I don't remember all the hard days. I don't remember all the hard moments. I just remember the preciousness of us being together and doing learning together and sitting around the couch and just all the beautiful moments that you need to remember. Those are going to be part of their memories, and it's part of building who they are. The legacy you're creating is who they're going to be as adults, and then they're going to have their own children, and they're going to pass on that legacy to
Right.
them. And so don't be discouraged about when things get hard. Adjust the curriculum don't you don't need to follow somebody else's schedule that they created. Curriculum creators like me, we're giving suggested schedules. You don't have to follow our schedule. You follow the schedule that works best for your family. You adjust it. Read less, read more. Whatever works for your family, use that. You can also toss out anything, any activity that you don't want to do that doesn't work for you. There was a lot of my children are specifically unique in their own brilliance and design, and there's some activities that just were not going to work for building a love for learning. And so we didn't do those activities. That didn't hinder their ability to do well, to learn, to remember the topic. It actually, if we force activities that our children are really, really resistant at, sometimes we discourage their love for the subject. And so you want to alter your curriculum to your children's unique gifts and talents. If your children are super active, go out, do school outdoors, do things differently. Change the way. Don't try to follow or emulate the public school system, the private school, the traditional system. Alter your homeschool to fit your unique children's needs. And it's a journey and it's not a race. And you can do this. You are designed to do this. God will help you do this. And don't worry about the hard days because every day is hard.
Amen. Sometimes the days seem long and the years seem short, but
Yes.
in the end, like you're saying, is so true. I remember that there were many tough days, tough weeks, tough years, but my memory draws back the wonderful joy and blessing that it all collectively created in my mind, in our family, and in our relationships. So
Yes.
yeah,
Amen.
keep that in mind. So you mentioned altering the activities if need be. So I got to ask you a fun question here. There's many experiments and activities in all the books in the Young Explorer series. Of all the ones that are out there, do you have a personal favorite one?
A personal favorite one. Okay, that's a great question. Um, I would say really any activity that took us outside was my favorites. I'm a big believer in nature. And as I mentioned, two of my kids have ADHD. And I didn't even realize I had ADHD because we spent so much time outdoors, and a lot of the experiments where your children get outdoors and they're doing experiments in nature, or they're actually just doing things outdoors that are activities and outdoor experiments is really, I would say, all of those are my favorite activities. I love them all, but I will say that as far as fun experiments and activities, most of those I would say are found in the chemistry and physics books. And as you said, you love physics, and I love the physics activities, such as just putting an egg on top of the tube, the paper towel tube, and then the water underneath it, and then hitting the plate, and it just falls straight down to exhibit inertia. Anything that you can, cause to bring physics to life, because physics is so all around us, and learning the the science of physics and understanding the connections of it really does help you in the whole rest of your life. When you learn about levers and torque and all of those things, you're going to use that for the whole rest of your life. And I love experiments where you're actually seeing physics and chemistry come to life, because you'll use that in cooking, you'll use that in doing projects around the house. And so I would say most of the experiments in chemistry and physics were really fun and interesting and are useful for everyday life.
No, that's great. Yeah, we loved sending our kids outside too. So plenty of outdoor activities. Sometimes we'd make them up just to get them outside.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the number one thing I said to my children is go outside and play.
so true. That is so true. So, Jeannie, as we start wrapping this up, is there anything we have not discussed today that you think you really need to tell our audience before we finish?
I would say that if you have a hard day and you're having something's not working, a curriculum's not working, don't just give up altogether. take a break. Sometimes you just need a mental break from what you're doing and then choose to go back and don't feel guilty. I know there were so many times when I would put something aside and I would I would say, okay, I just don't want to do that today. I don't want to do that today, whether it was grammar or whatever it was, but just putting it aside, hide it so you don't remember that you're not doing it because you do need a break. We don't have to do every single subject every single week. Sometimes we might need a 6-week break from a subject and then we can come back stronger. So just allow yourself some room to give your brain a mental break, your stress levels a mental break, and don't feel guilty about it. Don't let yourself feel guilty about altering your homeschool and altering the curriculum so that you have more peace and you can relax and then you can go back to it when you're ready. And so I would say just don't let yourself be stressed about everyday situations and when things get hard.
No, that's great. That's great advice. So people can find you and your curriculum at apologia.com. Are there any other websites or links that you want to share folks so they can get in touch with you?
I would love for you to go to jeanniefulbright.com. And I have a blog that teaches all about the Charlotte Mason method and all different, I give a lot of specific instructions for educating children. On there, you can also find on the Charlotte Mason tab, you can find my Charlotte Mason podcast, which I haven't updated in a long time, but there's a lot of good teaching on there. So I have a lot of help for homeschoolers on my website.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us today. As always, it's hard to bring these good conversations to an end, but it's that time. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us again next time. This has been Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. I'm your host, Davis Carman, and our guest today has been Jeannie Fulbright, author of the Young Explorer series. Have a great day, and until next time, we're walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.